Welcome to the FNO InsurTech Podcast, a place where movers and shakers from all points within the insurance ecosystem gather and discuss all things InsurTech. We talk about how technology and innovation are affecting and driving change in the industry. Here are your hosts, Matt D. Fothery, Lee Boyd, and Rob Beller.
Hey, podcast world, welcome to a new, exciting, thrilling, enthralling episode of
FNO InsurTech.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
These are your hosts. I'm Rob Beller, coming to you from Sheltered in Place, California.
And I'm Lee Boyd, coming to you from Waco, Texas.
Not necessarily sheltered in place, though, correct?
No, I'm in the office, and Texas is open.
Yeah, it's like, woohoo, let's go, right?
Yeah, the barber shops are open, the restaurants are open, retail is open.
I hope the hospital's open.
Yeah, it's open. It's saving 50% of its capacity for COVID in the event that it's needed, but it's open.
Okay.
Elective surgeries are getting started again.
Oh, they are? Wow. So you guys are like, let's take the gloves off. And the masks.
Yeah, I went to Target on Saturday and decided not to go in. I didn't get my wife anything, so I decided to go get my wife something for Mother's Day at Target. But it was wrapped around the building, so I decided not worth it, not going in.
What, the line to get in?
The line to get in, because it's 25% capacity, and people were just standing in line all around the building.
So they're only.
I don't know what they need in Target that bad.
They're only letting so many people in at a time.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't need Target that bad. I was going to buy her a sloth pool float.
But instead, what did you get her? Everybody needs to know this.
I got her the Friends Lego set.
The Friends Lego set. That's right, everybody listening to this podcast. You're not hearing things.
Yeah.
There is a Lego set for Friends, right? The TV show.
Yeah, the TV show. It's the coffee shop, and it's the Friends Lego set. We like Legos. She likes Friends. She wanted it.
Well, would you do us a favor? When you get it all put together, would you take a picture of it, and we'll put it on the website so that everybody can see what it looks like? I'm sure they'll all look forward to that.
You know what I'm bringing up to my office this week?
No.
I have the Disney Castle Lego set I put together last year. I'm going to bring it up here and put it in my office.
My kids loved Legos.
They're great. Who doesn't love Legos? What's not to like about a Lego?
I'm not going to.
Do you not like Legos?
I'm not even going to. No, I love Legos. What's not to love?
They have a whole
put
TV
together
show.
18 million different Lego things because that was like the standard gift to give to your kids for years and years and years and years, right? Because they loved it.
They're great.
Speaking of putting things together, let's talk about our guest today, Mr. Jamie Yoder, the president of Snapsheet. Yeah,
it's going to be a wonderful interview with him. Really interesting history, especially if you go way back.
Yeah, very interesting.
Hopefully we had to talk about him, but really, really knows his stuff whenever it comes to innovation and technology and where all this is going. And I imagine we're going to talk about, COVID and the world of claims, what that's doing to them now and how they're preparing. I think it'll be a great conversation.
Yeah, a great high-level addition to the Snapsheet team. Jamie brings years and years, decades of experience in the consulting world. And, that view of the industry to Snapsheet, which I'm sure is just an amazing benefit for them. But we'll hear all about that in our episode. And so without further ado, let's just jump into our episode with Jamie Yoder from Snapsheet. Hey, everybody. We are here with our very special guest who we have learned all kinds of interesting things about already before we started recording. And we're happy to have with us today Jamie Yoder, president of Snapsheet, coming to us from Chicago, Illinois. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. Thanks.
Welcome.
Hi. Welcome to our show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It's nice to have you. We like to have auto guys on because, as you know, we're property guys, and our section of the insurance carrier market sits right next to yours, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of good lessons we share with each other.
And we don't often get to have claims people on, but you are now at this point in your career an auto claims guy.
Yeah, it took a long journey to get here, but great spot to land.
Great. And we want to talk about your journey, but let's jump right in and talk about Snapsheet. Give us your elevator on Snapsheet, what it is, what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So Snapsheet is one of the leading insurtech players, and but obviously insurtech not as someone trying to displace incumbent carriers, but rather to deliver leading capabilities and to really help them on their transformation journey, really change the way they can engage their customers and really change the way work is done. And Snapsheet was founded almost a decade ago, so the early part 2011 with a really simple premise. And that's, our founder, Brad Weisberg, he got in an accident and went through an experience that was less than stellar and thought there could be a better way given the advances in technology and what's happening. So our focus then was very much around, basically was the pioneer of virtual claims for auto. But we've always been about the technology platform to enable that engagement with customers that you can start with, in this case, photos, but then through it, right, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You really drive a process that can improve your cycle time, improve expenses, and really create a better experience and handle friction really across the whole claims process.
Cool. And you're the president. What does the president of Snapsheet do?
So, I get to put my hands in a lot of pots, but, largely I'm responsible for, how we think of, how our offerings and the capabilities that we bring, how we go to market around really addressing the industry challenges and needs, whether it's carriers or, captives or others, how our solutions help them achieve better results with their business. I look at it, some of my background, which was consulting, is very similar, except we're bringing solutions. It's really business solutions to the advice as opposed to, the PowerPoint, the death proposition.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk a lot about Snapsheet and your technology and processes that you guys are involved in, but I want to talk for a few minutes about your really interesting journey. I'm going to put you on the spot here. So you are not a typical consultant, president of an insurtech guy. I mean, you're not from the big city and Harvard. Give us your background and your story. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, sure. So I joined Snapsheet a little over a year and a half ago as president. But prior to that, I led the insurance advisory practice, PwC. So obviously, major global professional services firm. I led it both U.S. as well as globally for a number of years. Before that, led the insurance practice at a company called Diamond Management Technology Consultants, which was a startup consulting company in the mid 90s focused on digital strategy, and insurance was our largest practice, which we sold to PwC in 2010. And then obviously had led the advisory practice there for many years. What's interesting is I've spent 30 years in my career really looking at how information and technology were changing the competitive strategies of the insurance landscape. And I've worked with hundreds of insurance executive teams around the globe on those efforts. And so, a lot of time spent both helping shape the strategy, but also leading through transformations. But the interesting thing, and kind of what we were talking about earlier, is in my background, it came from an Amish community and my Amish roots, family. And interestingly, so to have spent a career in how, in technology and insurance, right? If, two things the Amish don't have are insurance and technology. So, I like to joke that my father asked me to take a niche that you can excel at. And, so I like to think I'm one of the best insurance technologists out there. And, I've made my career on that. So, but it's interesting as I kind of mentioned earlier, obviously working with the executive teams and doing that was a great thing. And what I came to believe was that, transformation and really the role of advice and advisory, has obviously changed, that solutions can go so much further. And transformation had started to become a little bit more of an implementation synonym as opposed to really being about true change.
Yeah.
Meaningful change. And, the solutions largely exist today as a question of how can you really, it's more sculpting. How do you bring that to the carriers? How do you bring that to the market in a way that says, from an advice standpoint, these are the things that are possible, but the time it should take you to get there and the means to get there shouldn't be, months or years of work and tens of millions of dollars. The path to get there can be much better. And through those efforts, Snapsheet became one of my best examples when you looked at the claim space. When you
Right.
think about technology and the solutions they provide, they looked at me and said, well, you've been doing that a long time. Like, as you get tired of trying to convince people to make a move, why not help them achieve it? And so I came on board a year and a half ago.
That's exactly, what I was thinking about is you went from kind of looking at organizations and looking at trends in the industry and talking to people about this is how you should do it in so many words. And now you're on the other side of that, right? You might
Yeah.
sit with a consultant today telling you ideas and giving you ideas. So why did you go from one side to the other? I mean, did you want out? Had you had enough? Did you want to see what it's like to actually get your hands dirty?
To have a real job. I like to joke I'm a reforming consultant. Well, I think it is a bit that, right? So, I'd led an insurance practice for, close to 13 years and had been doing it for 30. And you want to look back ultimately at your career and said, look, I was part of driving that change in a different way and being part of something that's really affecting that change in a different way. Was attractive to me. And so, sometimes you look at it and say, if I've done, digital strategy and transformation for 30 years as a consultant, or if I did it for 35 years, all said and done, people just go either way, it's a long time. Right. Really wanting to sort of lean into helping to, affect the change. And I also think it's the evolution of advice in general. Right. And that is, we used to say to consultants in today's world, in order to get people to truly change, it's almost like you have to do the work to win the work or show the change in order to actually make it real to people to get there. I think we're at a time now where that's more possible than ever, that there has been a lot of capital deployed in the insurtech space, really around talent and the capital to invest in capabilities that show the art of the possible, that show how things could be done differently. And as I said before, Snapsheet was always my best example of that because, right, at scale, and claims, as you well know, claims is such a great space by which to show how technology can really change it, because there's a feedback loop, it's measurable, it's such an intensely digital process with information and key decisions that happen all across it. So the opportunities to deploy sort of new digital experiences and improvements are everywhere, right? And so we always say is really removing friction across the process. It starts with the customer, but claims is a party of many parties. And so all those handoffs between groups is where so much breakdown and friction exists.
Yes.
And so, digital is an opportunity to really push the full envelope as to what you could really do. And I think there's, as you well know, right, just
Right.
endless great change that you could do, and you can see its results.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to to do better, or maybe to create even a bigger black hole for things to fall into.
Yeah.
But if done right, is a great opportunity. And we're here in the midst of COVID-19 and all the various impacts that it's having not only on our business but on our lives.
Sure.
I was on a webinar recently, and I heard a chief claims officer say that COVID-19 hasn't changed our digital strategy, but it's accelerated it.
Yeah.
Please comment on that.
Well, I completely agree. And I think what's interesting is, in some ways, I like, we coined the phrase digital strategy. I'm in the mid 90s, so 95, 96. So it's been around forever. And it's kind of like, customer experience was talked about forever, for years. And everybody from a rhetoric standpoint was doing great things, but they really weren't moving the needle. Digital in many ways is somewhat the same. It's not that people haven't been investing heavily or had, major numbers of digital efforts going. Oftentimes they show up as tons of little pilots. They show up as tons of different things. And so what this really is, it's sort of it's a true sort of jolt to the system of, okay, it's not just that we're showing progress and we're advancing. We've been by necessity pushed far further, far faster than we were moving. Right. And, one of the challenges of leadership is always, is creating that sense of urgency sometimes when there isn't a crisis. Right. And so, but now we actually have one. And so I feel like, in many ways, everybody has moved the needle, but largely most people have known even more was possible. But, it's typically, incremental tends to win the day. And now you have this more of a, move to a new curve.
During this COVID-19, I'm curious on what the impacts were on Snapsheet, because we saw a decrease in autos being driven around, so a decrease in auto claims. However, I would imagine that we saw an increase in the desire to push down the virtual route whenever we did have an auto claim. What happened with Snapsheet during this past few months, and now what are y'all doing with all of this?
The obvious spot, right? You're absolutely right. Is obviously claims frequency in the auto space is directly correlated to miles driven, and shelter in place, means exactly that. That you're certainly not in your vehicle, and so like the broader industry, we obviously see a huge decline in frequency. So 50% plus, and that's the immediate effect.
Wow, that's a big number.
It's a huge number, right? It's stunning, right? Because
Stunning.
claims frequency is highly variable in normal times. And we're really hit by two factors now, right? So there's obviously the immediate effect of shelter in place. You have the economic downturn, right? So unemployment at huge high levels. You have economic impacts tend to then drive decreased auto sales. So all of which will then decrease exposures, and all of those have an effect on the auto volume and what's happening. But if you go back, take out COVID, you go back to 2008 and 2009. So while claims are highly variable, you still, even in 2008, 9, with the recession, you still only saw a drop of a few percentage points, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking, talking the levels it adds, right? Why you're seeing such huge implication to anybody, and ourselves included. Nobody escapes it. If you're tied to the volume business of the auto sector, miles driven, right? So, the rental car companies, the repair shops, the, anybody related to the travel and adjacencies, obviously there's an effect. So you have that, that effect on one side. But when you look at it from a business model standpoint, what is really interesting is that this is by necessity really thrust organizations into virtual, right? So, customers, there aren't many accidents, but where they are, customers, they don't want to see anybody. Their workforce has been thrown to home. And so you saw all the insurers just spend the first few weeks just trying to, how do we stand up people so they can be effective as remote workforce?
Yes.
That goes back to your point about, a real shock to say, how far had we really come on this digital transformation and what's possible, right? We did as much as we need to do to show progress, but did we really, nor was there a need to really show what is truly possible. But the virtual, we saw over years, as I said before, Snapsheet was a great model of you got to prove it could be done before people believe it, right? And we were fortunate that if you look at how we drove virtual appraisals, right, back when we started, there was 0% of auto appraisals done, via photo and done virtually. And now it's still in the low teens, but what you have is sort of this barbell where we have over 90 clients, 15 of the 25 largest insurers, but also who do it as a channel within many channels of their claims handling, right? So as a method of inspection, it's one of many. But you also see insurtechs or self-insureds, shared economy players who have vehicles, they would lean in 100%. Mm-hmm. And that pushed us to build the technology and build the process necessary to do virtual at scale for low severity claims. So just, minor ones to total losses, right? So any repairable or non-repairable of any type, right? We like to say if it doesn't float or fly, you can write it virtually. You can write the appraisal virtually. And we built our process and our technology and the data necessary by which to facilitate that process.
You said that you guys are a pioneer in this space. When you talk about virtual claims, one of the things that we know from our own work is what carrier number one considers a virtual claim, carrier number two might not. And so explain to us what you mean by virtual and what that actually looks like at Snapsheet and what that looks like to your carrier customer.
For us, it basically is once notified, right? So, if you can move it up into the first notice loss, great. But the point being, as quickly as possible, basically an assignment is made or the follow-up is done to the customer, right? So the customer is notified and saying, obviously one of the pieces, one of the things we need is photos in order to drive a process. And so, for us, we say it's sort of change the way you engage. Much of this is, people have evolved and have added these capabilities. People get that photos are helpful within the process. For us, it really starts with, when we say virtual, you moved away from the notion that the geographic, the resourcing, so the appraisers needing to be geographically located to go visit the person to provide the information or other is not necessary, or to write the estimate can be
Mhm.
done well before, as early in the process as absolutely possible, even before you go to the repair shop, and you use that as a basis to drive the process. So getting the photos, early days, we started off, it was really an app, and that was kind of a part of the process. What we learned is obviously it's just important to be able to get that information however possible. So omni-channel engagement, by which to, whether it be through a web app or through text or email or the shop, it's driving a process to get those pictures, the right pictures, as quickly as possible in the easiest way. In many cases, you could have that information before an adjuster even deals with the claim.
Sure.
And that informs the process and allows them to actually drive this through. So if you look at sort of cycle time and how long it was, a lot of it is less about how long it takes to write an estimate. That can be done in minutes. And a lot of people think, oh, if I could just automate that estimate, well, AI for the estimate piece, that's really kind of the shortest time frame in the process. Most of it's in the exchange of information with individuals that are involved between
Right.
Right.
the
And
insurer,
waiting for that.
waiting for that information. So we've spent tons of time on studies, and again, I talked about relentlessly looking at where friction exists. Why are we not able to get the information in all cases? Where is it taking too long? How might we do it? And evolving that process to be a way that works for the customers, right? Because getting that information is more valuable to the insured and to us than it is necessarily to the customer, but it's in the customer's best interest to guide a really simple process if they can provide it earlier. Then you can control like when it's right to get to a shop, was the right shop in different cases, what's the right process, is it a total loss? All of these things, you can inform the pathway for it earlier in the process. When we talk about virtual, then though, it's our resources live in the country, so the appraisals coming in, it's creating an optimal workforce model that our appraisers, and again, it could be like I said before, we license the technology out, it could be carriers people. It says, as opposed to being this geographic centric model, claims are just pooled, and then the in our case, the claim is the one who knows everything that has to get done on it, and it's the one that's captaining the process. And so it continuously looks for, given what I need to have done, who's the right person with the right skill set, at the right time to get that to them, and then provide all the context and information they need by which to make that decision. So as opposed to anything out of the guidelines or the state criteria, or where somebody's registered, you can optimize really how workload distributes to the system. So you have full control of it, which is a very different model than the old field, how you optimize field appraisals.
Is Snapsheet more of a technology? Is it the claims platform, or is there a process behind it? What do you specialize in?
So we certainly specialize, start with the technology platform. So, we built sort of native cloud-based platform, obviously, allowing us to continuously make updates. One of the advantages, so it's all, REST API, all truly modern tech stack, which the advantages are obviously we can deploy changes continuously. But unlike some newer, claim systems that, also may have a similar architecture, we built this up through learnings from our process itself, right? So, when you look at having, millions of claims that we handled through it, and
Right.
learning where friction stands, right? Funny thing about it is when you remove friction, you see the friction, you remove it, you find some more, and you can just keep that process. We call it, really, we built this learning machine to evolve our technology over 9 years. And so the process and the people were invaluable in that. One, because obviously we have a service business for auto, but two, how that's allowed us to hone the technology. And quite honestly, the data that we gain allows us to build new capabilities and keep adding that in.
You're not reliant on the carrier to give you all that data so that you can improve your product. You're not constantly having to sit in meetings with carriers to talk about what it's like, because you guys are actually doing it yourselves. I think that's really smart.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, because obviously we're going to focus this part of this conversation on auto, is we clearly have used the part that we drive for appraisals, because that was such a unique spot, right? If you look at any claim system out there, there really weren't tools that were built to optimize the appraisal process in this new way. So while we have that and license it out as software as a service, that component. We bring the expertise with it because, again, go back to what I said, we're really about the solution. We're really about how it affects. Transformation ought to be about affecting the change, not just here you go, good luck. And here's an implementation. But we've also extended that now. In this case, we don't use this in our service organization. We've extended out with some strategic partners and actual implementations with carriers to really go from a full claims management from F&OL through to settlement and payment, and using the same things the same basis of, if claims is really, and transformation is about changing the way you engage, changing the way the work is done and the way the work is managed, so that inside out, where I said the claim actually knows everything that needs to get done. It's using that for sort of zero code, workflow, really to push towards automation, the ability to automate all those administrative tasks and focus the effort of your adjusters on the tasks where, empathy and, decisioning are most critical versus assembly, follow up, and other things. We've been able to, hone how we, optimize the process to the end-to-end claims experience. So, that's what we say, push the envelope to what digital claims could be.
Is that what is going on with the Snapsheet and the Clear Cover press release from last week?
Yes. 100%. Right. So the ability, we said transformation shouldn't be many months and years and, millions or tens of millions of dollars. You should be able to, really establish, build, focus where the impact is made. And that's the engagement. And that's the, how work is managed and automated. That is absolutely what we've launched with Clear Cover. And, it's really a nice hybrid, even what we talked about, and where it's that platform to drive the end-to-end claims experience, right? And the appraisal capability sort of as a subpart of that.
So with them, so basically you'll take the first notice of loss and then they'll use your claims platform to go all the way through. And then I see another press release talking about payments. Talk to me a little bit about that one. That came out just recently. What are y'all doing with payments?
Yeah. So, the same way that if our pursuit really was, if I'm really trying to remove the friction across and create the, great customer experience for, and shrink cycle times, improve economic results for the claims experience. Well, we had done that in appraisals, and we had these great results in improving cycle time and, dramatically changing, cycle time and delivering sort of massive productivity improvements. In that, what you found is you got to a point, well, then a payment's to be made, and then 80% of the industry is still paper check. So you get to that point and you approve it. And then you were left with this, okay, now we're going to send you a paper check and it's going to come to you in a week or so. And, it was just this, like, here we were at the very end, and now there's this, really ugly experience right at the back. And, so even, a few years ago, we actually built out our payments capability, and now we're obviously scaling and offering it more robustness, but it really is, the basic. We look at it and say, if, ultimately company carriers, 80% check has less to do with whether or not they could offer different payment rails. Most of them work with a bank and say, well, we could offer different rails. The challenge is if you can't engage the customer to get the information, right, and you can't make it as easy as absolutely possible for the adjuster, right? So remove that friction, right? Use engagement to do that, to drive adoption. Right. So you may offer different rails, but doesn't mean anybody's using it. And we've experienced, adoption levels of movement away from check, even if it's just, ACH or same day ACH, but also facilitating any future form of payment, whether it be Zelle or push to debit and future payments. Ultimately, it's about building those claims workflows. So the adjuster simply needs to say, would you like to get paid fast or slow? Well, no surprise, most customers would say fast. Right. And then the adjuster doesn't have to do anything else. Or if you're trying to automate the claims, right? So we obviously build within our platform, everything really centers on, intelligent workflow. And while there's been a lot of talk about a push towards automation, the means by which to readily provide that, right? So to operationalize a lot of the key sort of decisioning tools necessary, or to automate these administrative tasks that I mentioned, right? You can't, payments is a clear one because, great. If I couldn't finish that in line, it requires the claims use cases to be handled like multi-party payments or vendor payments, and sign, early settlement requires e-signature, other steps, right? You can actually, drive that through, the system can drive that and exchange that information between the claim system and the treasury system and the bank. And, by doing that, you can truly drive out greater efficiencies, much,
Sure.
greater tracking, greater transparency, and compliance. All important things, right? But it's just like, by such a simple step, it was, if you looked at the COVID response, a lot of people were stuck with, the person who wrote the checks, right, wouldn't get in the office in the first couple weeks.
Right. Right. I want to switch gears for a second and talk about a paper that you wrote recently called Digital Darwinism,
Yeah.
which I thought was really good. Can you just real briefly, what do you mean by digital Darwinism?
It's a lot of the things that we're talking about, and that is, the notion that, evolution, these changes that organizations go through, or the opportunities that are presented, while in the past, they happened across generations. Ultimately, the power of digital is that change is happening, numerous times over the course of, your career, and within companies. And so, how do you really create, not just, we did a digital transformation project, but ultimately a digital transformation is about creating this sort of learning organization, an organization that and in an operating model that can take advantage of capabilities that may give you innovations today, but are set up to basically add in those new capabilities and evolve without big new projects or big changes or these episodic sort of releases.
Right.
As I described with Snapsheet, it's that ongoing find friction, fix friction. How did it work? Keep going.
One of your principles in here that really struck me and I really enjoyed, and I want you to speak about for a second, is where you said, change the way you change, innovate, don't renovate, don't start from scratch.
So, it's interesting. One of the advances, one of the key, and I think sometimes, I don't say it's overlooked because it's always talked about, but it's the less sexy, right? AI gets a lot of attention, and some of these times the extreme technologies get the most attention, and probably the most revolutionary one is just the simple, API and web services, and the ability to actually modularize things, you get more granular and apply and reuse lots of things that are there. And obviously, that's not how legacy systems are architected. I would contend that that's not how even systems that people are putting in on their modernization efforts over the last few years, that's not how they're architected. But when you break it down, you say everybody's got obviously any incumbent carrier has huge amounts of assets and activities that are there. Trying to replace the whole stack is, there's so many, there's a huge capital outlay. There's, huge upfront efforts with these. And the truth is that a lot of times, you might need to do that ultimately for tech debt, but the benefits exist in where you changing the way you engage your customers in the process we've talked about, and in how you actually operate, right? So, new capabilities that change the way you're operating to automate different work, as we've discussed, right? But ultimately, everyone leaves that to last. Well, let's replace all our technology and then we'll see how we use it. And, and the truth is there's huge opportunities, right? I always look at it, if your focus is on the decision processes, how am I improving the speed and efficacy of decision making, right? And, whether that be, again, like we talked earlier, getting information from the customer as quickly as possible. There are things I can do that are highly beneficial, that drive far greater outcome, that can work with some of the things that are there in your environment, right? So we look at our claims management system, we can be the ultimate system of record and replace the whole stack, but you don't have to start there. You can actually start on the digital surround and the digital engagement and digital, and how work's managed, and get huge benefits. Then we'll rationalize some of the architecture, as opposed to let's just replace this whole thing because that's going to be easiest. Well, people don't have tens of millions, or don't want to spend tens of millions of dollars and take a few years to do that, because at that point, especially if I then to make the next change requires another big program and another big effort, because by the time you get there, it's out of date.
Let's talk for a minute, just kind of finish up on the topic of COVID and auto claims.
Yeah.
Is this something that's going to change auto claims forever? What do you think? Do you think that the future of auto claims, obviously down the road with autonomous vehicles and whatnot, auto claims are changing. Everybody in the industry knows that. What role does COVID play in that change?
It's interesting. The autonomous, maybe it accelerates some of that. Obviously, it would be great if the Ubers and, the ride shares, Ubers and Lyfts of the world were autonomous vehicles, because we don't want to get in one with the person driving it now. So in some ways that would be nice. But It's still, some ways off, obviously, but I do think COVID accelerates, as we talked about, accelerates this push to, okay, because we're incremental and it's the way we've always done it. It's easier just, we'll add virtual into the mix. Organizations in many cases they've been thrust to operate that way, and while when the volume's down 50% less, it's easy. Heroic efforts can get by and handle that volume without problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
The question
Correct.
for organizations becomes what happens as that volume then returns. And even if not to normal levels, right, it just returns in some form. And I think what we're going to see is if you, run forward over the next 12 to 18 months, the setup for what's there, I think, and which will set the long term is, there's really a question of what's the shape of, everyone would say we're at kind of at a trough, but what's the shape of the return, right? And, as I said before, claims frequency is highly variable in normal times, but it's going to be really challenging to make a call on frequency over the next 12 to 18 months, right? You've got not just COVID, will there be rolling lockdowns, right? How will the return to work happen, right? What's different aspects of the economy and what that means. And so there's a real challenge with matching the expense with what have become shifting customer expectations, right? So a lot of carriers would say, yeah, our customers, they really like that person coming to see them. And it's kind of like what we were talking about before our call. We realized that I don't really need to travel I don't need to be on a plane every time I need to talk to somebody. We've been really effective in these video conferences. Doesn't mean we want to go 100% away from it, but people have really learned how that they can be as effective, if not more so in some cases, less for some parts, but on the other. But so the customer's expectations have shifted,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's been a real push toward long-term automation efforts, and I think this accelerates the need to get there. And given a short-term frequency dynamic that we're facing, I think this is putting a real shift in a challenge to the strategic imperatives of carriers. So again, anybody can handle the volumes that are there today because they're so low. It's a question of now over the next few months, how do I prepare for high variability ahead of that's coming, right? From an expenditure standpoint, from a skill standpoint, effectiveness standpoint, but then use it as a basis. Might as well build out to what are the digital capabilities that can really take me further as I continue to move forward. So how do I create operating model flexibility, right? How do I enable that flexibility to take advantage of the existing capacity I have, but how do I maybe variabilize my cost structure in a way that absorbs some of those peaks and valleys a little bit more?
Yeah.
So I think there's a real good sort of hard think, if you will, that everybody is doing or should be doing
Mm-hmm.
around what that really means, given most people would say we can automate increasingly more of this over the next 3 to 5 year period. The question is, what does it really mean to position myself to do that from a not just a technology standpoint, from a people standpoint, from a process standpoint? And as we said, how do you build that organizational muscle to be that learning machine in order to get you there appropriately?
Yeah, that was kind of one thing that came into my mind as you were speaking was how big of a role does automation play in all of what you're saying? I mean, is this a time to push automation even further?
Yeah, I think so. Right. It exposes a lot of not that we didn't know they were always there, but the investment to, again, as I said, it's what you ultimately want is it should be a business decision about where you really want to deploy, where people are absolutely best positioned. Right. I don't think anyone goes into it in design and said, what we really want our people doing is a lot of administrative tasks to prepare them to actually have a great conversation with the customer or the other. We want them to have great conversations and interactions with our customers. We want them to make the best and fastest decisions. And, there are so many things, as you well know, in the claims process that have nothing to do with that. Right. And, so many of those things can be taken care of. And then it's about inserting the people in the absolute best spot, because it is, as I said in the paper, but obviously every process is a mix of, humans and machines and what's possible. But I should be designing not by the constraints of my technology, but by the business decision of where the absolute best use of the resources is.
I mean, who could have foreseen where we are today?
Yeah.
Did you ever do any scenario planning around What would happen in a pandemic?
I sort of did loosely, but I'm really cheating. I would never would have modeled a scenario where claims frequency drops 50%, right, or more. I'm a huge, obviously, advocate of scenario planning, right? Modeling is a huge background, and even like so in 2010, 2011, one of the things I had done is authored all the future of insurance work and research in PwC. And part of that was when you lay out a thing for the future. I always loved that we said 2020 was the at that time push people it's far enough
Whoops.
off, matter. And in those cases, right, you do take the extremes of how far could things go, what events would happen, right? So you would throw in a scenario that talked about where there'd be a global issue, whether it be regulatory, sweeping change, more nationalism, and or other, and a pandemic was one of the things you would throw out there, but it wasn't something we put any real analytical
Muscle.
weight behind
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
No behind it at all. It's like, oh man, oh god. At that point, we just throw in that, we just shrug, right?
And here we are. And to me, that's one of the more interesting parts of this, which really, has to do with all of our businesses, is that so many of us are figuring this out as we go.
Yeah.
And week to week, because every week kind of presents a new, oh, wow, we're done with that phase, but now we're in a new phase.
Yeah.
And there is no end phase yet that we can see realistically. And what an super interesting time for a business consultant.
Yeah, it is. Or even in the claims, as I said, how do you actually create an operating model flexibility? I always say that in order to really optimize and really pursue what the possibilities of what digital could actually mean to an organization, I always said you needed a new operating model, but you had to have new capabilities in order to create that operating model. And conversely, the operating model wouldn't make any sense without those, right? So nice little loop that really, if you're really going to jolt people to accelerate digital transformation, that's what it required. Well, that's exactly what COVID has done. And what's interesting is, we looked at it and said, nobody can guess what's going to happen around, are we going to have rolling takeout? What does that really mean? How fast does claims come back? At what level? And how will that evolve? Right. But, so we have that certain uncertainty, right? But you can say, we know that's certain, right? We know the uncertainty is certain. And, how do we actually, really build the right capabilities to handle it? And so I think, that part of the change is interesting. I think it's unique in that, insurers, other than the, some of the economic pressures and what that will mean, recessionary time around expenses and the other, they are afforded the opportunity, the larger carriers afforded the opportunity to invest in now to get that right and actually accelerate those things. That gap to them on the claims being down is, that it will have a long-term effect, but they have a window by which their resources are available and have capacity to some degree. And, how do we accelerate those efforts that people would, kind of just thought they would dole in over a course of years?
Listen, we so much appreciate you being with us today. We know that you're a busy guy, even sheltered at home, you're a busy guy. And we appreciate you taking some time out to talk to us. I have one last question for you that we like to ask people, because why not? And that is, what's the most interesting or surprising thing that has come to you or that you've thought of or experienced as a result of COVID? Is there anything that comes to mind?
To be honest, it's, as I said before, 30 plus years and being a consultant. So, I'm an airline's favorite customer, have been for a long, long time. So, I lived on planes as largely in my office. And, what's amazing to me, and it seems so subtle and so simple, and that is, obviously we're all doing, video conference calls from, from dawn to dusk. And, the funny thing is, it's not that wasn't available to us all along. It's, nobody ever turned on their video. And, conference calls and video calls, there's a huge difference in the effectiveness of what you can, accomplish. And just a simple thing that people have now wanted to turn that on. I don't think that goes back. And I think, obviously, for me at least, it's, this is not revolutionary. Everybody gets this. But, for me at least, that's a life changer that, so it was really funny because I would be in one city and obviously do remote for anybody else I was talking to in another city. So it's not like I didn't know it could be done, but for some reason I always felt compelled to have to be in a different city. And, truthfully is we can get a lot of work done very effectively this way. I'm not going to give up the fact that I want to get out and see people and do other things. but I don't have to be on a plane every day. And, it took me 30 some years to realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a once in a century pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great lesson. Lesson.
But that's a great one. And I mean, we all have several of them. Mine too, like we were talking before we started today. I mean, to do with travel. Can we maybe do this on video? And save us all a lot of time, money, effort, exhaustion, etc.
Yeah, it's a fascinating. It's not, again, it's something that's been right there for us. It's just the behavioral change to adopt it, to do it differently than we've always done it.
Well, Jamie, we appreciate you so much being on today. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, no, likewise. It was a real pleasure. So I appreciate it, and good luck and be well.
Thank you. We'll talk again.
All right, take care.
I find the auto space really interesting, and it's attracted somebody as smart and as deep as Jamie Yoder.
Yeah, it sounds like he got a really neat deal. I mean, after 30 years in the consulting side, he has a lot of knowledge. He has a lot of insight into what insurance carriers are trying to do. That was a great hire on Snapsheet side.
Great hire.
Yeah, I mean, and he's a smart dude, right? He understands. He's written a nice paper. I'm going to have to go read that. I did not read that beforehand, but I'm looking forward to it.
Actually, when you dig into Jamie Yoder, what you find is that he's written many papers. I'll go as far as saying he's an insurance intellectual, and has a lot of very interesting things and ideas and thoughts. And digital Darwinism has many interesting ideas and thoughts in it, particularly for those of us who are involved in innovation and transformation in our organizations.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to read that. But yeah, I enjoyed the conversation today. We didn't get to talk about some of the things I wanted to talk about the property space and all that. But, it's really neat to see where they're at and to kind of understand what they're going through with this whole COVID thing.
Right. And we're very thankful to Jamie and to you, our audience, for being with us. Please reach out to us and tell us what you think. On our website has a contact feature that you can just email us, and we want to know what's on your mind and what you think about our podcast.
And also, any suggestions about future guests or future topics, we'd love to know that.
Absolutely. I mean, we do this in large part to give our audience insights and knowledge. And so let us know what insights and knowledge you'd like to have access to, and we'll chase them down the best that we can. Yeah. And so we thank you for being with us and look forward to next time. And so we'll say the one thing we always say.
Bye, everybody.